order the special planning commission meeting for tonight. Ms. Maggie, call roll. Public order.
Mr. Moon, Mr. Becker,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Davidson, Mr. Celestine, Ms. Smith, here, Ms. Hanson. Here.
Let's all stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here tonight as an update of the comprehensive plan with Ms. Dana Brown and Associates. Maggie, you have any comments?
No, sir, I don't have any comment. I'll turn it over to Ms. Brown to start the presentation.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for having us here. And we're happy to talk about the comprehensive plan concepts and recommendations more. And tonight we're going to focus on land use at your request, and also the closely related transportation and infrastructure. As we put this presentation together, even though we were trying to get into implementation, it just seemed too difficult to squeeze that into. So we thought we'd focus on that in 2 weeks, if that's okay with you. So tonight we're preparing land use and transportation and infrastructure. I'm Dana Brown. Taylor Femmel from my office is here. And Tim Jackson from Myers Engineering is one of our sub-consultants, and you're going to be happy to know he's going to present tonight too, so you don't have to hear just me. And we'll just go ahead and get started. This is just reminding us of the vision, because the whole purpose of this is to make sure, as much as possible, there's a framework, guideline, foundation for you and staff to direct the city toward the vision that you and the public has for the city, which isn't obviously or any kind of big change. It's really a preservation and sensitive, intentional kinds of changes in growth. So land use, as I mentioned, is the first thing we're going to talk about. We have up here the existing zoning area. You might want to compare that to what we propose for future land use that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay? This first slide shows you the existing land uses, and it shows you how it's obviously telling you things you know, but it's important to point them out and remember. A strong core of the downtown. We have regional corridors that provide retail for not only people that come into the nearby areas, neighborhood centers that are in the neighborhoods or near neighborhoods, which is a really good thing. And obviously, you have strong residential neighborhoods and minimal uses like industrial, also considered a good thing. So this is just a bigger version of existing land use, which we don't have a map of. And this is just to remind you what categories are of land use. It's more detailed than a pure generalized, but still somewhat generalized. It's basically single-family residential. Can't read glasses on. Shopping business or other kinds of trade businesses is in red. Industrial manufacturing and waste related is in purple, I guess. Social institutional is in blue. And then green is leisure activities, which could be active or not active, recreation. But you can see the patterns, and it's very much what we all know about Covington and Lightfoot. The major growth breadth is obviously to the north. Is it growth? It's to the south. You'd have to have houses. So that's existing land use. In addition to that, I have some overlay zoning, and the only reason why we're pointing those out is some of them relate directly to how development could and possibly should occur in the future in these particular areas where there's planned unit development or planned commercial development, and that's great because it's not just parcel by parcel, it's a larger parcel where you can make something be a better plan. And we talked about that a little bit last time, and I'll mention a few of them, like businesses that are retail closer to the street, as opposed to the parking being right up on the street, things like that. Which also I'll refer to when we get into smart growth again, just touch on it, because that's an important thing, and that's directly related to character that you already have to be covered. So we just wanted to point these out, just to help us remember that we have these overlay districts. It's a great tool to use when the underlying zoning is different. It's just how we sort of play it out. So how has land use evolved over time, which is starting with an historic riverside community that kept expanding and meant the street grid got reoriented a bit, but it's still a grid. It's better than a grid. And growth started to occur across the rivers, particularly to the east, obviously. And now, as I mentioned, the big demand is north, around Rockford, Highway, and those areas. So let's talk about future land use, which is the meaty thing we're going to talk about today, at least that I'll present. And the purpose of it is to make sure future land uses don't degrade that character of Covington, which already stated in the division you want to maintain. That the commercial areas remain viable or get stronger, as opposed to what happens in some areas where new commercial occurs over on another area and it sort of pulls all the business from the existing commercial area. So commercial needs to grow and residential growth, whether it's in the city or near the city. Want to ensure that green space and natural areas are preserved. So it's also part of the character of raising a family here, living here. They're fragile neighborhoods, and I'm going to talk a little bit more of that when I get into some social equity issues, but we want to protect them because they can be vulnerable to changes that aren't beneficial to people. I'm going to identify land use areas for future residential that can meet demands of population growth. As people in the region, the population isn't getting bigger, it's moving around. And a lot of it's moving to town. And it's Canyon Parish, Tancola Parish. And you can see that in yellow areas on the map. Want to connect the existing and new commercial to the residential areas to make those function better. And all that really does relate to land use, even though that might sound like just the streets, transportation issue there, obviously, they're connected. And then strengthening the city's character. So that's the purpose of looking at future land use. And here's the future land use, just this map. Closest to the Smith right there, and that's we're happy to use them. They're helpful to you, but it's as you know, it's primarily residential. We're not proposing a big change. What we most looked at is the small commercial areas. I should explain something. Yellow areas that have a red stripe means there's some neighborhood commercial in those areas, could be in those areas, and they do correspond with the zoning. So we're not focusing in those areas, changing zoning in terms of land use. We'll propose changing how the land is developed, like setbacks and things like that, or how the streets are treated, but not the underlying land use. Okay. And regional commercial uses near the recent growth, like LA 21, Hills, and L5, Covington Commons, which is everything north. So you can see mixed use up there, as well as some darker colored brown for potentially more dense residential. That would make sense there. And then you already have a strong institutional presence for the maintain. So I'm going to really point to the top of the map and look at that as the only area we anticipate that would require possibly some zoning changes, so there could be some mixed use. So there might be a community that is somewhat like the place on Perkins.
Part of that, your age.
Yeah.
Not quite.
But there's been a place that is truly mixed use, that has some core commercial but has residential in it, and that's a place that would attract a lot of young people because they can get in the market with lower cost apartments and even townhomes and things like that. And it makes sense there, so that's what we're suggesting now. It's obviously your call. And so that's the only area we would see, some zone changes where you can see on the existing zone map, it's mostly red. So we're trying to say it should be more mixed in that area, but still pretty dense. Okay? Let's any questions about that right now? We're going to come back to that anytime we want. So how can we manage the growth and land uses? And I'm talking about smart growth. I'm sure quite familiar with smart growth. These principles are in the element, and they're also will be in the final comprehensive plan. But one of them is about the first item, which is infill. Build where you already have infrastructure. That's just some common sense. First, build where you already have infrastructure, expand infrastructure from where you have it outward and have growth there. And there are several ways to do that, which has less to do with land use, but about regulatory kind of tools you can use to say if there is no water available in that area, but our water system, drinking water, if it has the capacity, the developer has to pay for that extension. And that makes sense rather than say people who already live here have to pay for an extension for a developer who's going to make out of the hinterland where the land's cheaper, which is why they lie. So that's one way to do it. You don't have to do it, but that's a way to do it. About same thing with drainage, same thing with wastewater treatment, conveyance systems, and that happens only where you have the capacity to handle that additional water demand or wastewater treatment demand. So those are some of the simplest ways to try to focus growth on infill development. And so it just makes that property that otherwise is less expensive and therefore attractive to a developer, it makes them more comparable in price to the infill land that already has that. Otherwise, there's a burden. So other principles, as you can see in the list, and I won't read this to you, so relax. But it's about mixed uses, and it's about definitely a mix of housing choices so that people can get into the market and move up gradually in terms of price or size. And a variety of transportation choices that Tim will talk more about in just a few minutes. And try to get communities that are developed to be distinctive, to have a real character, but it's comparable or comparable, complementary to the city of Covington already. So my analogy, I'm sure I brought a picture, is that I could show you a subdivision and ask you where it is, and there's no way you can tell. And it's actually from Indiana, but it looks like anywhere. And why would we want to do that in sunny Louisiana? Why would we want to do that on the North Shore? I don't know. It seems like it should have more of a roots into where it is, in relationship to where it is. That's my view of the world. Probably because I'm a native, right? Why would we look like Indiana or Utah or California or Pennsylvania or anywhere? So back to the bullets on the left side is reuse in the historic district. That's typical everywhere in the country. You've already seen that, and it's a great way to maintain the historic buildings in your downtown. You know that. And then finally, we talked about it briefly last time, is that the growth management areas, and I'll show you a map of that in a second, really are about growth when there's pressure to grow, but you have to decide what's pressure to grow. If you annex an area, that means you not only get any of the tax revenue from it, which if it's single family, it's not much, but you also get the burden of the infrastructure, whether it's streets or water, sewer, drainage, and maintaining that in perpetuity. Whereas that land can still be developed without the city annex. So you're not forbidding anybody from developing something. It just isn't going to be in the boundaries. So just keep that in mind. I think it's important for you to adopt a policy, it's our strong recommendation, that any annexation has to be because it makes fiscal sense for the city of Covington. And obviously, retail will almost always make fiscal sense if they're the retailer. Who knows what's going to happen when COVID's over? Maybe almost no brick and mortar retail left. I don't know. Or do brick and mortar. You doing all right? Land use recommendations. Okay, what are the growth management areas and the order in which they are intended, the order in which they're intended to be implemented, which was last updated in 2003. So it directs the direction should go north first, and then southwest, and then otherwise. But it should depend on, as I just mentioned, utilities and transportation infrastructure and services as well, right? Police, fire, you have to, even if it's commercial, you've got to have significant fire suppression capacity to deal with retail areas. Land use recommendations are not just about land uses, because to make those land uses work, you might need other improvements, and this is where land use overlaps with several other elements. Community character, transportation, connectivity. So we have mentioned a few times about really facilitating pedestrian circulation and bicycle circulation, and the best way to facilitate that is to make sure it's as safe as you can make it. And part of that is crosswalks, fixed dangers at intersections. It's always at intersections. The cars have to be visually very aware of this is a place where people are going to cross by bike or by foot or both. And then enforcement, usually if you enforce that for a few months, people get the idea and they don't go too fast through it, or they make sure they stop fully at the stop sign. But it's really about safety. The other thing you do is clean streets facilities, which I know Tim's going to talk about a bit more. I mentioned retail, multi-family, closer to the street, so that when you are walking down the street, you're not walking down this field of parking lots. You're walking down a place that's a place that has a sense, that has a character like And then, have large retail, like a Walmart kind of thing, you can still develop those. They can still have all their parking in the front, but you put these other buildings right on the street that also set that stage for what it's like along the street when you're walking and driving a bike. So there are ways to do it, and we have lots of examples that we've worked on over the years where that other building, those other buildings in the front, smaller, you see it around. That makes it work better. So there's, yes.
And in regards to big box stores, is there an example that you know of where some communities are putting the big box stores with frontage right, closer to the road than we see nowadays? It's Walmart's behind the parking lot. Is there, is there, I'm sure where it's the big box stores fronting the main thoroughfare?
Yes. Glad you asked. And I'll, maybe I'll pull some pictures and just send them to Nikita to share with you. My favorite, one of my favorite stories, is that, let's take Walmart. And if you think back to when I was a student, when you're doing designs of facilities, buildings, commercial, right, there were these flat files that had drawings in them, right? Drawings, these big flat board, you put all those drawings in them. It's a sort of antiquated analogy. But, so the theory is, a community can, Walmart can say, we're not opening Walmart here. And the community can say, great, we want you here, please come. What would you like us to do so you can come? That means Walmart's going to go to that top floor, pull out their least expensive, standard way of doing it, and that's all you're going to see. But they got a whole stack of drawers. They really do, because there are communities around the country who demand that they do other things. And I'll promise you, they might go right outside the city. They might. But they've already done their marketing, and they wouldn't be trying to come here if they didn't know they were going to make money. So you're not forcing them to spend money where they wouldn't make money and therefore couldn't be here if you make them go down that file, split files, deeper and deeper. So some of the things you can require them to do is the kinds of materials that are placed on their facade. It has the actual bricks. You can require that. It has to be in your code somewhere where it's legitimate for you to require that. You can't do that offhand or one development at a time. You can require them to have, or at least fake penetration, so it's not a big blank wall. You can require them to be closer to the street and have minimal parking in the front and have most of the parking on the sides. They can't really do it in the back because it's slipperies. There are a lot of things like that you can do that the buildings just like to one side might have to articulate, or it might have different penetration. You can do that, but it has to be in requirements in that zone for that land. So they have, so like Winter Garden, Florida, has, I know, I'm seeing the picture of a CES right in front, right on the street. There is no parking. You can make them do that. I tend to find that my state tends to do like, oh, thank goodness, come, do whatever you want to do to us. We really want you here to bring those low-paying jobs. It's like, I think we can demand a little more. We have a market here, and they want to be in this market. So one of the things that I proposed, and this is a little off topic, and I apologize, that in a community in North Baton Rouge where we were trying to get grocery stores in some of the neighborhoods, there was a nearby, well, it wasn't that near, Walmart. We were talking to them about, would they help almost sponsor a really small grocery. It wouldn't be a Walmart grocery. It would be owned by people in that neighborhood. You would help buy in bulk and sell it at your price to that grocery. So that grocery, that's a small grocery, could get the Walmart unit prices, right? Because the small groceries always have to have higher prices. We were close to doing that, and then some politicians screwed up something, but anyway, you know, they want to work with you, and if you can give them things that they can brag about as being good neighbors, they're trying to be good neighbors. Another example is McKinney, Texas is 15, 20 years ago, Walmart built their first sustainables. Solar power, natural light through windows, green infrastructure for stormwater management, just everything you can think of. That was just their pilot so they could know how to do it. But nobody knew to do it anywhere else.
Was that a requirement of the community?
No.
Did you know
Some
that?
of it might have been. Some of it might have been, but they were also, they looked at it as, probably some of it was, and I should look it up, I should learn about that. I have friends who look at it, so I should know. But the bottom line is they ended up looking at it as an opportunity to look at pilot. Even the materials that they used in the building were sustainably sourced materials. I mean, they went the light inside, you know, everything was just so they could do it.
And they also, their neighbor, the city of Dallas, also required, because Dallas in the late 2000, 2003, 2004, there was no Walmart inside the city of Dallas proper. And when Walmart went into the city of Dallas proper, the city of Dallas made them do everything to a urban pedestrian scale as opposed to doing something to a suburban scale as we had in Arlington and in Fort Worth. So their neighbor, the city of Dallas proper, also required Walmart to make some adaptive changes to the overall design from a pedestrian scale standpoint, and also have the parking inside and in the rear as opposed to having no parking.
We'll get some pictures. We'll get some pictures of those in Winter Garden and McKinney and other places and send those along. I'm sure you have something. We'll put it in a package.
There and also Cary, North Carolina, things like that too.
Another follow-up question. Whenever you require aesthetically pleasing retailers or commercial spaces, is there any correlation with that to increasing the prices? So, one of the things we have to be aware of is, we don't want to make, we don't want to raise the standard of the aesthetics of the building and then essentially just pass that cost along to the people in the community. Is there any correlation in that?
Well, the big box generally no, because they get their goods that they sell giant bulk unit prices. But if it does in any way, it's not going to be substantial when you think about it, because of the bulk of what they do, the amount of what they sell, and they'll appreciate that those investments quickly anyway. So they might use that as an excuse, and they've got away with a lot of. And I don't blame them. That's their job, right? To make as much money as they can, and I understand that. And so they let. I mean, I'll look at a different example would be Cabela in Ascension Parish. They wanted to go in East Baton Rouge Parish. East Baton Rouge Parish had some requirements, and Ascension said, no, come, do whatever you want. Destroy our area, we don't care, we just want Cabela. So we're to just go a mile, half a mile. They just let them create what they wanted to create. At the same time, Bass Pro is, well, or part of that, Bass Pro had done that with Livingston. So they pit us against each other, and if we would, you know, you guys have good relationships around here, that would be good to not let them do that kind of thing. But, tax dollars are possible, that is an issue. So, okay. We good? Good questions. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. So there's some policies that there are ways to incentivize them, and there are ways to make it be a stick if you don't do it versus a carrot. And it's about the infill mixed use, and I talked about it. Another way is if there's a way to expedite permitting because time is dollars to the developer who's paying he's paying a loan on that land that he bought that isn't bringing in any money. He's paying designers and contractors that aren't bringing its money going out the faster he can get it built and the door open, the more money he can save. And if there's ways you can look at expediting, and we don't have to be honest, but that's one thing that some communities are doing specifically for infill vacant land. And also for mixed use developments. We're suggesting you adopt the cluster and conservation subdivision kind of ordinances that work to help preserve an area as opposed to making it look like a subdivision in Indiana in the prairies. And we also recommend that you allow accessory dwelling units in single family areas where the lots are of size, but put a lot of controls in those ADUs so that they're not they have to be compatible with the primary building that they're associated with and the neighborhood that they're associated with in scale and materials, the colors, all those kind of things, and that they should be in the back, not in front. So ADUs we recommend, but with controls, so they know. And what that does, right, is it lets people have a little more dense neighborhood without being ridiculously dense. So this tend to be, the ADUs tend to be for an empty nester, father-in-law, mother-in-law, or it's, don't or downside state of age, and it keeps some prices down for renters. So
It doesn't necessarily have to be like immediate family or anything.
I don't think it does, personally. I know some people are concerned about turnover. But I think the homeowner is going to be more concerned about it than people in the neighborhood. But that's an issue that they try to put into effect in some communities to say it has to be immediate family. Well, then probably don't really have a little family. And some of that has been proven not really defensible. So that's something that when you get into anything with your research more and get an opinion from your city attorney.
That would be where you would set up size and the occupancy and so forth.
Yes, where we got on materials, scale, that stuff. And then the other thing we brought up last time too that we think is important to clarify, which we like really give up some work on, is limit variances to truly documented hardships, and if there's a way to apply that such that it becomes really difficult for that to be able to occur. I think that's important, mostly because you're a responsible planning zoning condition, but you're not doing it forever. And other people come in and just think, oh no, that's all right. I've done a lot, it's okay. So it's important that it's done, and it also protects the city from, not from lawsuits, anybody can sue you or anything, but your defense, your actions and your concerns. Some other things would suggest to you that we, don't have a lot of very specific things to offer you yet. We're working on that for implementation. Is looking at policies about social equity. This particular map shows you the darker areas of the neighborhoods that are most vulnerable. According to census data, for various, this is 50 different factors that isn't just about income. It's about health. Very simple, they're all right now. But to help minimize, if not prevent, racial and social injustices, and a lot of it has to do with making sure that there's equitable green space, parks, and services there, libraries and police, fire, that the streets are maintained as well. Lights are replaced when they go out on the street. It's amazing how much that happens, where those are the neighborhoods where that isn't taken care of. And a lot of it's because they don't complain as much as the people with a lot of money would. But that's the thing you have to sort of intentionally take on, and put policies in place. So we're going to monitor this. We're going to see what's going on there. We think they need more of this. We're going to try to do that, and then we're going to check back in 2 years, see how it's coming in there, and 2 years after that, or whatever it may be. And some zoning codes in that area might be updated. Mostly it's about infrastructure being adequate and being maintained in those neighborhoods. And then finding programs and funding to help people who are, do have lower incomes to try to keep up their profits first. And that's where I think we recommend we work with nonprofits. And there are plenty of very, really great nonprofits in this region that will work. A lot of them associated with churches that will work to, come in and paint their house or fix whatever might be. And I think, as I mentioned, I think that has to be really special. So, that's my part of the presentation. I'll turn it over to Tim, but come back with questions that you might have. And you can ask Tim as you go along, we want this copy of it. You got it right? Thank you, appreciate it.
Like I said, my name is Tim Jackson. I work for Meyer Engineers. We're on the team. I'm not an engineer. Work with engineers every day. My youngest son is a civil engineer, so I kind of know how they think. They like to build. They like to build buildings and roads and stuff. And all that stuff is expensive. So we can talk about what's y'all have to look forward to. What we're recommending. First of all, we looked at the transportation and infrastructure. That's what I'm going to talk about. And all of this, as Dana mentioned, overlaps. Oh, by the way, I used to be a planning commissioner. I was on the city planning commission in New Orleans for 8 years, and chairman for a couple years, so I feel your pain. And we had very similar issues, maybe on a grand scale. That happened first got to the commission. So Walmart is now Chocolate Tools was being considered. And we had all these discussions about aesthetics and building materials, landscaping. The city had at that time, very little regulation, very few regulations that dealt with that. So all kind of negotiated. And Walmart representative, when they were asked about doing this kind of urban how did you describe it, like an urban model store rather than just suburban, big building and miles and parking. So, no good. So they built what they built. 2 weeks after it was approved, in the newspaper, same representative from Walmart is quoted about the status for the Keita just mentioned, talking about this new urban prototype store that they're so proud of, that it's going to be more compact, 2-story. It's going to have the elevated things for the shopping carts, the Target and Clearview has, that we've seen that. So, avoid this. One, it's important to have the regulations and the policies in place to deal with it. And in a couple areas, I'll talk about some of that later on as we go forward.
Right now.
All right. So this is your transportation network. You probably know it a lot better than me, traveling every day. We looked at what you have, did some numbers. Most of your streets are local streets. One way to look at it is the city has to pay for everything there, basically. 75% of it. The principal arterial major collectors. Major collector would be like Tyler, Collins, bigger streets. And those are, state or federal highways as well. So there's some cost sharing on improvements in those, widening. But y'all have a pretty established network. Downtown, especially, it's got a grid network that Smart Growth and New Urban is trying to recreate everywhere y'all have. Then y'all have the Tammany Trace, and which is an important component of all this, because we have Dana has talked about the Complete Streets program and trying to establish transportation opportunities for all modes of transportation, bikes, pedestrians, cars, some cases even orderlies and such. So one of the things we heard in the public meetings and the surveys that we did from a lot of folks is they'd like to see some kind of mass transit or public transportation system. And the component aging exam came up many times. So this is what that program is. It's funded by FTA, and it's on demand, so you have to schedule it apparently a week in advance. But it looks to be pretty popular. It's got 6,000 to 7,000 rides a month. That's apparently there's some kind of need in the so that's parish-wide too. But there's a good part of that in Covington. So that's something to look forward to. We don't have a specific proposal for that. There are opportunities there for the city to look at and look at establishing something like that for even just for the downtown, the whole downtown area, the commercial area, to feed customers into that neighborhoods. We already have a number of completed transportation-related studies. Dana Company did several of them over the last 7 or 8 years. The traffic calming and activity plan, Covington Bicycle, Complete Streets Policy Plan, that was in 2018, Congestion Management Plan. So all of those plans had a number of specific recommendations on improving parking, pedestrian network, safety, and there was a slide earlier with showing an intersection and crosswalks and high visibility crosswalks and pedestrian signals, all very important part of that, those recommendations. And then there's some programs that are available that other communities have used, walk, school bus and bike to school days to promote those kinds of things. You know, a lot of people go to school all the time. Apparently, it's for a lot of reasons, it's not it's not done anymore for safety reasons or whatever. But I think there are opportunities for that to be looked at, and some of these programs are being done in other communities as well. And then the truck routing, I'm sure you all have seen the trucks in downtown Covington where they don't belong. It's important to improve the signage, enforcement, and update the navigation system so they know where the designated truck stops are. And then infrastructure, that's everyday stuff that the civil engineers like to deal with. Water and wastewater, here's some typical examples of some of this is open ditch. There's a lot of that in Covington. There's some there's a discussion about it that's preferable to the subsurface drainage, which is on the right. One of the advantages you can see is it can be multiple uses in the same area, drainage underneath of the sidewalk on top. So here are three maps that are hard to read at this scale. It's one on the left that shows all the drainage ways. Basically, everything's going to be draining ultimately into the rivers that pump and lie. And then there are different middle one is soil drainage classes. So you have different types of soil drained differently, and more pervious and impervious, so there's more runoff. And then on the right is the water and sewer map that shows the water mains and the sewer lift stations. So a lot of the infrastructure recommendations came as a result of, again, public meetings with the public, some of the things that they had input on, and then also your public works department and engineering department. So one of the things that came up a few times is modernizing the SCADA system. That's an acronym that is basically a computerized monitoring system where they central location in City Hall monitor water level gauges in the canals or the rivers and monitor what's going on in the sewer lift stations and the sewer treatment plant. And apparently you'll have some version of it on probably an antiquated system, and there's a need to, one, update it, modernize it, and expand it to all facilities that your public works folks can keep track of what's going on around the city, especially during a rain event. And then some of the issues regarding the sewer network. Appears that your sewer wastewater network is a little bit more problematic than the water distribution system. There's a lot of infiltration in the pipes, so that happens in a lot of places when the pipes get old and they start collecting water from rain. So basically your sewer treatment plant is treating rainwater. So those pipes need to be replaced or reconditioned or to prevent that, because that affects the capacity of your sewer treatment plant. So those facilities need upgraded. Drainage, we talked about that infrastructure, but also that's a hazard mitigation part of the plan, because they kind of overlap. So we're suggesting that the city of Covington develop a stormwater management plan. EPA has some guidelines on doing that to one, to increase drainage capacity, but also to increase water quality that's going into your rivers and streams. So to improve that, the ecology of the area. Going back to what Dana talked about with policy, cities, regulations, development regulations. City could require development to have some and he's looking to impervious surfaces, or rather, reducing the amount of impervious surfaces, to decrease the amount of runoff and how fast it runs off into your drainage system. Green infrastructure programs, lots of, we're working on one in a couple of places in the state right now to update its city's regulations to require development to address their on-site drainage capacity and storage to limit how fast it runs off. Some of it can be done with rain barrels, if you will, or rain gardens. Doesn't always have to be that way. Sometimes it has to be underground pipes underneath the parking lot. But it's, all of that's cumulative effect when all that runoff hits streams and rivers. That's causes a lot of problems here and elsewhere. And then the telecommunications, put that in. To me, that's almost like something that should be at the top of the list, because apparently the 5G technology is out that go around. 25 years ago, the cell company putting up towers everywhere, ignoring local regulations. Many places didn't even have regulations on how to regulate the stuff, and those telecommunication companies play hardball. So the cities and parishes had a lot of catching up. Well, it's sort of like that again with 5G. There was new technology. It's not as big, as you would say, not as tall. There are a lot more of these little towers that would be spread throughout the city to accommodate it. It's, a lot more than just making your phone faster. It's affect how businesses operate with the new technology. Ways I can't tell you because I barely text. But apparently it's coming. It's a big deal. But the problem is those towers, those poles, be very ugly in the city like Covington, where aesthetics so important, especially in the downtown historic area. I think the city needs to probably jump on that. It's probably one of the least expensive things to implement. But I think very important. And you look at some examples of Jefferson Parish. Jefferson Parish is already independent, and the city of New Orleans regulations on the 5G technology installation. There's some examples of what it looks like before those regulations got implemented, and it's something you probably don't want to see coming.
You have some like sound boards about areas that have already started doing that.
Yes. Picture of what it looks like.
Yeah, but the process that other cities have gone through to
Yes.
get them in place.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of ran through that, but I have any questions for Lynn, they're all here to answer your questions.
Anyone have a question?
How long will it be? Is it like 10 years to implement it? Well, we're actually going to present that in 2 weeks, and we're still working on how to get the timing down. How long it takes to do some of the improvements will depend on the funding. So some of it will be like when there is funding available, when there's a federal program or a state program that you can tap into to get funds to do something. But a lot of it is policies, a lot of it is programs, and there are things that are, it's not that they cost nothing because they put a burden on staff. They put a burden on the city staff. Or they might require, you might want to hire consultants to do some of it. But so some of those can be done more quickly. What we're setting up for you is a series of types of projects. So the first group is what we call a quick start project. That is intended to show that once this plan is adopted, that something's being done. It doesn't just sit on the shelf. And we're recommending that, for instance, again, we'll talk about more in 2 weeks, that you maintain the comprehensive plan website and you show updates on that website. It could just be a link from the city website. You probably could structure it, but show that here's what's happening, implement the comprehensive plan, you know, this quarter, whatever it might be. And show it and, you know, have a brass band out to point out that too often comprehensive plans, maybe a lot of it gets implemented, but the public doesn't know, and they were involved a lot in a lot of workshops. So I think they appreciate hearing that, but also a lot of times they just sit on the shelf and nothing gets done, and a different planning commission, different council group comes in, and then it just sits there and nobody really even told them it was there. You just don't know. So we're proposing those quick starts that are easy, and we call them quick starts because they're readily available, able to be done. So clearly that means they don't involve DOT. There you go. They're not costly, but they have an impact. They have a beneficial impact. And hopefully this, then we have some near-term projects that, you know, you could, again, the criteria is the same, but benefit, and some of them might cost more, but the benefit is important to get as soon as possible. But some of them might not cost much, so we'll have that near term, a mid-term, and then a longer term, which, again, if some kind of funding becomes available that focuses on something that's a long term, that would jump up and you could do it sooner. It doesn't mean you have to do it in that order. That's what we're recommending based upon what we can sort of assume about funding. And then you also have the issue of things change. Market demands change, population of people, amounts, types of people, what their needs are, might change. And then that may make you change, but at least it's set up so that you can start going through it and implementing like the first year, and then after that it's like, you know, near term, just 2-3 years, like 3 to 5, and so.
So this is based on your professional experience as far as prioritizing the list of things we can do so that the public knows this is getting done.
Yes, and that's our recommendation to you, which we want to talk about a lot next time, so you could say, I'd rather move this up. I think this is more important. Or this one, you know, move that down. We don't really want to do that right away. We don't think the city's ready, the population's not ready for that kind of stuff. But that's what we're going to have to do next.
In the initiation of these recommendations, who initiates it?
Well, it depends on what it is. So we also show who's responsible for it. So it might be that that's the engineering department's going to do that. It might be that the planning department has to do it. It may be that it's some kind of combination, or maybe you've got to collaborate with the parish to do that. So we're showing all that with each one, so you know who's responsible for it. But they don't have as backup an adopted comprehensive plan that says they should be doing this now. Obviously, there are projects identified that those projects have work to do before they're ready to be done. That's anything else?
Got a few questions. Is there a deadline for us to approve the conference?
March 15th?
We had set the date as March 15th as a recommendation date. Of course, if you have other questions or other concerns, if we have to extend it into April, then that's going to be at your discretion. and also based on comments that we may receive via the website, from citizens.
Is there anything that legally obligates the city of Covington to implement a comprehensive plan by a new comprehensive plan by any particular day? Is there anything that grants or that sort of thing, we miss out on if we don't get this done by?
Well, this is an update.
Sure.
And you're supposed to update every 5 years.
So we overdue. The last, you can't say that, but I'll be bold enough to say it, we're overdue. The last comprehensive plan that was approved by the body was 2007.
One of the things that I'm struggling with is that there are a lot of pretty great recommendations, great ideas. I don't understand, and this is just because I'm ignorant. How does what we want to do, for instance, with respect to zoning changes, actually make it into the ordinance? Or is that something, who's gonna put the pen to paper and write the changes? That's kind of what I keep my head around.
The collective group of people up here are the people who make text changes to the ordinance. I'll give you an example. The 2007 comprehensive plan had what they call short range, midterm, and long range implementation strategies, similar to what Dana has outlined. One of their short-term strategies was for the city to redo our zoning ordinance, and that's the text of the zoning ordinance. And after that, it was to redo the zoning map itself, because you have to first have the text that's going to be applied to the map. So it was this group, being the Planning and Zoning Commission, that worked with the consultant to update the zoning text and to update the zoning map. But also in the short term, there was some immediate text changes that needed to be implemented in relationship to the signage and the landscaping section, which this board recommended to city council that we make those changes. And then, of course, any zoning changes, any zoning text changes, or zoning map changes are recommendations of this body, and they have to be ratified and approved by the city council. So it was a lot of meetings between 2008 and until the zoning text and map was actually implemented in 2011. So this would be the body. One thing is that this body also had recommended, when it came to the subdivision ordinance, that the city council and the city administration fund the update for the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. So that's how some of these recommendations were communicated to the city administration, who had to fund the update because we had our consultant to do the update.
Yeah, for instance, Mr. Jackson mentioned the issue with 5G cell phone towers. And that seems like something that we need to get ahead of quickly because, it's here. And with the ordinance language is going to be right where it says the city sets out its back whether their expectations are.
Yes, no, I think, go back to your question, other communities have done this already, so including Jefferson Parish, City of New Orleans, I believe Baton Rouge, so you sort of have examples that you can model that you start with, you can see where they did modify their ordinances and their regulations and add to them or take away something that fits the other. But you're not starting from scratch.
So you understand that even that process is daunting. It takes time.
They have a very small staff.
And you have a telecommunications section in the ordinance now. So whenever, currently now, we issue our permits, and there are design standards and landscaping standards in the telecommunications section. And we also talk about the possibility of clamping, disguising how new towers should look. But that section would need to be updated in terms of design standards as we relate to the 5G technology.
Specific changes of the language of the zoning ordinance do not set out verbatim in the ordinance.
Correct.
You can say, hey, you think this is a great idea for the plan, get it working.
That's correct.
Okay.
Karen, sort of a plug for the department, if they had more planners, then they could do a lot of this in-house.
And you're absolutely correct, and let me say this, Nikita and Joanne not only have planning to do, Nikita and Joanne are also occupational wine, beer, and liquor license. And we also are in charge of the rural grant program, giving loans to people as well. So we have other responsibilities that go beyond just the regular day-to-day. So
No, I understand. I appreciate everything you're trying to do.
Something they need to buy some.
You need to buy it and make it.
Not to plug, but the right word.
Gotcha. I think it's a piece that you're trying to operate new. So we're trying to figure out all this.
It's complicated. Sure. It is. Should we answer your questions? Yes, more? You have longer? Yes, more.
You confirm for me that you don't have to write the ordinance for this comprehensive plan, just do whatever.
No, no, that's another whole process. So the plan, one's the legal doc, one's a legal doc. You do, yeah.
So the next meeting, we're gonna have the implementation recommendations, correct?
Yes. We're going to send them to you ahead of time,
Right.
but we'll have a presentation so that we can really talk about, we're going to talk less about the recommendations, so we're hoping that you'll give us feedback before that. If you see something that you want to comment on about recommendations in each element, but if you want to comment that, that's fine too. But we're hoping to mostly talk about those in terms of framework.
Everything else.
I don't have any other comments. Just let me add that our next review of the comprehensive plan and implementation is that we talked about at the February the 8th, 2021 meeting. And for that meeting's agenda, we have only two items. One item being the review of the comprehensive plan, and the other item is a text change. Okay? And just a little reminder, please continue trying to get your ethics training in 2021. We already have 2 members that have completed their training. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?